If you're baking at home and you've ever rolled out dough by hand only to end up with a lopsided crust or a sore wrist, you know how frustrating it can be to chase consistency while trying to keep things simple. The last thing you want is another gadget that looks great on paper but ends up gathering dust because it's too loud, too big, or just too much hassle to use every time you bake. That's why I wanted to take a closer look at the OMCAN 42154 dough sheeter, because not all dough sheeters are created equal, and this one might actually fit into a real home kitchen without taking over. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. This isn't one of those massive commercial-grade rollers that takes up half your counter and requires a degree in dough mechanics to operate. Instead, it's designed to sit on a countertop, fold up when not in use, and handle dough in manageable batches, perfect if you're making pizza dough, pie crusts, or even laminated pastries at home. The key here is practicality. It's not trying to replace a full bakery setup, but it does give you the control of a sheeter without the bulk. That's a big deal if you bake regularly but don't have a dedicated baking space. One of the first things that stood out to me is the maximum dough capacity. For a home unit, it's surprisingly capable. It can handle up to about 1.5 pounds of dough at a time, which is enough for multiple pizzas or a couple of pie crusts. That's not something you'll find on every countertop model, and it makes a real difference when you're trying to roll out dough efficiently. If you've ever struggled with dough that's too thick in some spots and too thin in others, this machine helps you get it right the first time. It's not going to replace the feel of a rolling pin entirely, but it does take the guesswork out of thickness, which is a game changer for consistent results. The working position dimensions are also worth noting if you're working with limited space. It's compact enough to sit on a standard kitchen counter without blocking your workflow, but it's sturdy enough that it won't wobble when you're feeding dough through it. That's a common issue with smaller, cheaper models. They can feel flimsy or unstable, which makes the whole process more stressful than it needs to be. This one stays put, which is exactly what you want when you're trying to focus on the dough, not the machine. Now, let's talk about the trade-offs. Because this is a motorized sheeter, it does take up some counter space even when it's folded up, and it's not something you'll want to move around a lot. If your kitchen is already tight, you'll need to plan where it lives. Also, while it's designed for home use, it's not silent. Expect some motor noise when it's running. That's not a deal breaker, but it's something to consider if you're trying to bake early in the morning or late at night when others are sleeping. Another thing to keep in mind is the learning curve. Even though it's marketed as user-friendly, getting the dough thickness just right takes a little practice. You'll need to adjust the settings based on the type of dough you're using, and it might take a few tries to dial it in. That's not a flaw in the machine, but it's worth mentioning because if you're expecting a set-it-and-forget-it solution, this isn't quite it. You'll still need to pay attention to the dough as it goes through the rollers. So, who should buy this? If you bake regularly, whether it's for family meals, weekend projects, or even small business experiments, this dough sheeter is a solid investment. It's especially useful if you've ever felt limited by hand rolling or if you've struggled with uneven dough thickness. It's also a great option if you're tired of buying pre-made dough that doesn't quite meet your standards. The value here comes from consistency and time saved, which are two things that matter a lot when you're in the kitchen. Who should skip it? If you only bake occasionally or if you're working with very small batches, this might be overkill. A good rolling pin and some elbow grease can get you just as far without the added bulk. It's also not the best choice if you're looking for a commercial-grade machine. This is strictly for home use, so don't expect it to handle the demands of a busy bakery. The manufacturer warranty is a nice touch, but it's worth checking the specifics before you buy. Warranties can vary, and you'll want to know what's covered and for how long. That's always a smart move with any kitchen appliance, especially one that has moving parts. At the end of the day, the OMCAN 42154